Oh baby, gonna tier the Salmon Run bosses. So first I want to say this video started out as a joke because tier lists are like already all over YouTube as this really low effort unscripted content, and nobody needs a tier list for Salmon Run bosses. Like, it's not a competitive mode. You can't like choose which bosses are gonna spawn. But the more I thought about it, maybe this will actually be helpful or interesting to people, especially because all these bosses are confirmed to be coming back in Splatoon 3 Salmon Run. So it's fun to think about them again and how they performed. I will say that this tier maker also has like the Mothership and the Griller and the Special Wave bosses. I'm not going to talk about them because they're kind of like, they don't spawn as often, and when those waves do happen, they don't interact with any of the other bosses. And also, I've played like hundreds and hundreds of hours of Salmon Run, and I still don't really know what to do against glowflies. Like against the glowflies rush mode, I feel like I still suck at it. But these core 7 bosses that appear in the normal waves, I feel more qualified to talk about for sure. Let's see here. Oh, and sometimes I like to think about like if Salmon Run were a PvP mode, if it were asymmetrical PvP and one person, it was like 1v4 and one person was like the DM and they were choosing which bosses to spawn and where, which ones would you spawn? That mode would never happen, but it's kind of fun to think about. I'm just going to start in F tier and then work my way up. Moz. Moz is F tier. Don't spawn these. I talk really dismissively about Moz in my streams, and it's like really embarrassing if I die to one, and I hope I can explain why now. Moz are egg delivery vehicles. They come along, they track you, you can let them track you right towards the side of your basket, and then kill them there, and then like they might as well be dropping 3 eggs straight in your basket. They're so convenient to the player. I can't tell you how many times like we've been in really dire straits in a wave, and like nothing's coming towards our basket. We're short like 6 eggs from quota. There's like a bunch of ranged bosses firing at us, and I see the little blinking lights of like 2 Moz coming towards me, and I'm like, oh, we're saved. I'm like happy to see them. That's how bad they are. What else can I say? They definitely, like, they do, I mean, I do also die to them. Everyone dies to them at some point or another. Usually it's because a lot of other things are happening and your movement is very restricted. Because their area of effect is not really that large. When they're swimming, their area of effect is 0, other than, like, the thin trail of ink that they drag along. And then when they attack, it's like very telegraphed. It's really just that like small circle with the blinking lights that like shoot up into the sky. And even the size of that circle is kind of misleading because if you're right on the edge of it, they will just pop you up into the air. Or like if your momentum is carrying you out of the circle, you'll just get popped up. So the area of effect of them actually being fatal is like smaller than that even. They do have high HP. They have 1200 HP, which is technically the most of any of these bosses. But like, all that's really required to kill them is one of your 4 teammates having enough ink for a splat bomb. As long as you have that, you can kill a Moz, you know? Nobody should ever really be shooting at them. It's a little bit of a noob trap that you can shoot them at all, because a new player might see a Moz and shoot at it and see that their shots did damage and like put ink on it and be like, oh, I'm supposed to shoot it. But no, like please just only use splat bombs. I won't say never because sometimes, you know, somebody might like splash down or something and the Moz will get caught in the blast and you'll see a Moz with like a lot of damage on it from something else. And it might be the correct play to like just shoot it for the last few points of damage instead of using up the ink for a whole splat bomb. So like I have done that before. Sometimes I think it's the right play, but it doesn't really affect where I place it. Like if it just had fully invulnerable skin, and you couldn't damage it that way at all, I think it would still probably be F tier. Just because like one person having a splat bomb, and you don't even have to aim the splat bomb really, you can just spike it at the ground. Or if something is on the ground between you and where it's going to jump out, you can just kind of like lob it over the circle and it will jump out and eat the bomb. Like, it's pretty player friendly. And the only other nice thing I can say is it climbs walls. That's maybe the one annoying thing it does, is it puts paint on the walls that you carefully painted, and sometimes can like knock you off them if it goes up a wall or down it in the opposite direction. That's super annoying. I hate that. Also, when it jumps out of the ink, it's like kind of a temporary, like a really temporary splash wall for a second, because you like can't swim through it. So I have had it happen where it'll like be jumping out of the ink at a choke point and I can't swim past it, and that ends up getting me killed. But that's very rare that either of those come up. So yeah, F tier. Moving on, we have the Scrapper. Scrapper is very similar to Jaws in terms of strengths and weaknesses. Also kind of an egg delivery vehicle. Also tracks the player. Also very small area of effect, although like it at least has a continuous area of effect, but it's physically just very small. Like, it's the smallest of any of these bosses. It does shoot the little like jets out the side. Those have a hitbox that's a little bit bigger than they look maybe, but by and large, like, they're kind of just barely big enough to cause problems at like a choke point. Everyone has it where, like, again, they're a little bit of a noob trap where it'll drive into a choke point like on low tide on a stage, and then somebody on the team will shoot it right when it reaches that choke point, and like no one will be able to swim around it, and the player doesn't know that you're supposed to swim around it. They're like, oh no. You're like, what are you doing? But yeah, if you know, like, the one thing that makes them definitely better than Moz, I know, is that they're just much harder to kill. Like, ideally it takes 2 players to kill them. They have I think it's 1100 HP. The shield on them has 600 HP, and then the fleshy body part has 500. So like, combined, if you're fighting them on your own and you're focus firing the shield until they break down so that you could circle around and shoot their back, that's like almost as much ink as it takes to shoot a Moz until it dies. It's like very inefficient to do it that way. Ideally, you have one player like make it, point in a direction so that another player can hit its backside. The backside having 500 HP, most weapons can kill that pretty quickly. So like, they go down quickly if you can get them directed, if you have like teamwork. And they die in one shot to E-leaders. So E-leaders technically don't even really need teamwork if they're behind them. But E-leaders are just like a great Salmon Run weapon in general. Let's see. Yeah, there's definitely places and like weapons where you don't want to engage with them, like below the basket on spawning grounds, where there is like those catwalks and like a lot of columns, and it's like level ground and really close quarters. If you see like 2 scrappers coming, like, I've definitely just noped out of that situation before. And if multiples come and there's like 2 or 3 scrappers in a line on one side of your basket, like, that's definitely a problem, but every boss coming in multiples is a problem, So yeah, the main cons of them, just not much space control. They have to run right up to you in order to do anything to you. They have to bump you 3 times before you die. And the main thing that makes me rank them low is they're just really easy to ignore. Like, yeah, it takes a lot of ink to make them totally break down, but any amount of ink at all will make them stop briefly, like stop for a couple full seconds, which is enough for you to get the heck out of dodge. Like, even if you're using a splatling or a charger, like, those can tap fire. Literally just tap fire them if you see them coming, and then you will have enough time to do whatever you need to do in whatever area that scrapper is at. Again, unless it's like perfectly positioned at a choke point. which, you know, doesn't happen that often because, again, they're like super small compared to the other bosses. All right, next boss. This one will maybe surprise people that I don't think it's that good, because it's definitely the most threatening that I've talked about so far, the Steelhead. It definitely has a bomb that is a one-hit kill and has a pretty wide area of effect. I won't take that away from it. The bomb does have fall-off damage, so like you won't necessarily die if it hits you a little bit. And you don't know exactly what the radius of the bomb is, unlike with Maws. So it can be kind of like a judgment call whether you're in its range or not. But the main thing that I think makes the bomb not that good isn't even that it fires really slowly, or that the Steelhead moves really slowly to get in position, or that it's really telegraphed. Well, the telegraphed part does play into it. Where like, first it has to charge it up, then it has to throw the bomb. The bomb like makes a whistling noise as it goes through the air, and then it has to hit the ground. And then after it hits the ground, it goes like, and then explodes. And that instant where it explodes is the only point in time when it actually can hurt you. You know, the rest of the time it's just like, you know, maybe it's like you're anticipating it being threatening, but you can like swim around that bomb. You actually have plenty of time. Like there have been cases where, or there have been times when it's like bombing away at our egg basket, but if there's just one Steelhead doing it, it's like you can kind of ignore it too. Like you just have to flit outside the range of that blast for that one instant, and then you can go back in and do what you have to do. I should talk about killing it. It's like clearly meant, I guess, to be a charger target or a ranged weapon target, and those are probably the best weapons to deal with it. But like pretty much any rapid fire weapon will also do the trick, as long as it's like, you know, medium range. If it's like splatter shot range, you'll probably be fine. The only weapons that really struggle with it, I feel, are like Sploosh-o-matic, or like maybe a splatter shot junior. Those will be like, I'm pretty sure I've been like on the ramp near the basket and Lost Outpost, like kind of on high ground, and jumping at it with a Sploosh-o-matic, jumping at a Steelhead, and still having most of the shots not hit the bomb. That's pretty frustrating. But yeah, the bomb doesn't really have much HP. It's only 300. So yeah, most rapid fire weapons can do 300 pretty quickly. Like a heavy splatling could do that with like a quarter of a tank. It's really not that hard to get them dead. One weapon that struggles against them that you might not expect is the Jet Squelcher. The Jet Squelcher, just because it's like a slow-firing rapid-fire weapon, and its individual shots don't do much damage. It takes 9 shots to kill the bomb, which like is tough to do in a single cycle. But the other nice thing about the Steelheads is any damage you get on the bomb carries over to the next bomb. So like if you don't quite kill it, and you have to wait for the next bomb to come up, that bomb will take even less time to kill. Yeah, and finally, this boss does something that none of the other bosses do when it dies, which is it becomes a bomb for your color. It becomes a bomb for like the players when it dies, and it will one-shot other Salmonid bosses. Like if a Scrapper has its back facing it, it'll one-shot that. It'll one-shot other Steelheads that are charging their bombs. You can get like 2 for 1, not that infrequently, if you just like kill a Steelhead at the right time. It's very interesting. Like, I don't think it would necessarily even like I might move it up 1 tier if it didn't do that, if it just like imploded like every other boss. But I don't know. Like, I don't think these actually need to be balanced against each other, again, because it's not a competitive mode. It's like fun. It's fun that a Steelhead explodes for you when you kill it, so I'm glad it does. But that makes it, you know, pretty player friendly compared to the other bosses. Alright, so this next boss is maybe the hardest one for me to tier. it has really extreme strengths and weaknesses. So I feel like that kind of balanced out to a mid tier. And I'm talking about the steel eel. So steel eels are absolutely a problem. The thing that's really good about them is their space control, obviously. It's like if you took a Steelhead's bomb and like stretched the explosion out into like a thin line and just made it like continuous and like made it move around like a snake. Like that's definitely a problem. Like that space control is definitely so much better than any of the bosses I've talked about so far. And it kind of acts as like a bus that can smuggle in other salmonids too. Because if something is like sitting in the grate of the steel eel, it can be hard to have your shots all land on it. And yeah, like steel eels like pretty much fill up choke points by themselves. When they spawn on high tide and like are just instantly between you and your basket, they're definitely a big problem. So like I find myself killing steel eels, like really prioritizing them over all other bosses. And so that's interesting. You might think like, well, wouldn't that make them like top tier if you should be killing them first? But I don't necessarily think that's true partly because they go down really quickly. Like when you do get any kind of clear shot on their weak point, they just like fold. And then like if a wave starts with 2 steel eels, it's like, oh, that's annoying. But you know, you back off for 5 seconds and wait for them to reveal their weak point, and then you kill them, and then you kind of get on with your life, you know? They're a little bit of an egg delivery vehicle. Not as bad as some of these other ones, because the eggs only drop at the back end of them. And so like that might be further away from your basket than like the head of them is. But otherwise, you do kind of kill them with the same principle. Like they track one player. So if you're that player and you have even like, if they're in a choke point that's like even wide enough for 2 steel eels, basically, you can just lead it up one side of the choke point and then do a U-turn, and it won't, you know, fold up on itself. It'll just like expose the weak point pretty easily. They definitely do fold up on themselves and like coil up, and that's really annoying. But that usually happens because like, I don't know, somebody didn't know it was targeting them and they like moved too soon towards the back of them. But yeah, there's like, most weapons do pretty well against these, especially ranged weapons. Like I know the Steelhead is kind of the ranged weapon target, but if you have a charger or a swatling, it's really easy to get a clear line of sight on the back of these. You can just like stand anywhere on high ground or like perpendicular to where the steel eel is going, and you will have a clear shot most of the time. Like I've had waves where I was playing a charger or like an E-liter. Again, they go down in one hit to an E-liter, where I'm just like, steel eels keep spawning, and I'm just like picking them off one by one. Because it's hard for them to... It's not like they're the scrappers and they're like invulnerable from 4 sides. They're really only protected on the one side where the head is, and from everywhere else, including above, they're very vulnerable. And the other thing is they have to get, like scrappers, they have to get right up to you to do any damage. They do more damage than the scrappers. They kill you in 2 hits. But, you know, like there'll be cases where one player is left alive and they kind of can just, and there'll be like 3 steel eels after them. And they can kind of just like swim in a big circle, and the steel eels will all follow them. And then they rescue their teammates, and the steel eels are just kind of like out of the picture because they take too long. Even though they're fairly fast, they're like, you know, not as nearly as fast as inklings are. And so they just like take too long to threaten you again. So yeah, I mean, again, they're probably like the best space control boss. I'm not trying to undersell them too much. If there was a human player spawning them, I think you would still spawn these. I think this is like the cutoff point. I would not choose to spawn anything below steel eels on my tier list if I were trying to like make players lose. But I would spawn steel eels. It's like you'd probably still have to be I don't think you could like spam them though, you know, because again, in the wrong spot, they just go down so easily. All right, so you can see my last 3 bosses here. Clearly, I value ranged attacks, attacks that, you know, bosses that can like attack you anywhere on the map. But it's not only that. It's also that there are ranged attacks that like pretty closely mimic PvP specials, each of them. Like the Stinger is a stingray from like season 1 before it got the big shockwave around it. And the Flyfish is like a Tentamissiles, obviously. I don't know if the damage values are like 1-to-1, but like, you know, they're very similar. Just this thing that can sit there and like do Tentamissiles on you over and over. That's like so much higher in scale of power to these other 4 bosses. And then the Drizzler is obviously just spamming ink storms, right? And I'm trying to think of like if any of these other bosses are even close to being a special. Like I guess the Steelhead is kind of like a booyah bomb if like you weren't invulnerable during charging it, which would suck obviously if you could just get shot down. And also the damage is done all at once instead of being a lasting explosion, which I think is worse. The Steelhead, the Steel Eel is kind of like if you took a Kraken from Splatoon 1 and stretched it out, maybe. Like if there was a special that just turned you into a Steel Eel and you still had the weak point on your back, I guess that would kind of be like a longer, slower Ultra Stamp. So I don't know, maybe people would use that one, but again, I think it would be conditional, situational, and you'd still end up dying a lot, like if your teammates don't cover your behind. But yeah, these 3 are just like straight up solid PvP specials in boss form. And I think that clearly sets them apart, in addition to, again, being the opposite of egg delivery vehicles. Mostly they will not be close to your basket, and so you have to go out of your way to kill them, and then they don't even reward you once you do kill them. So the first one I'm going to talk about in tier is the Drizzler. Maybe players overlook these because they don't do great damage. It's actually pretty mediocre damage from their Ink Storm. It's 18 per second, so it takes like about 5.5 seconds to kill you, like 5.5 straight sitting in the Ink Storm, which is bad. Like that will almost never happen, but that does assume that you don't have any damage on you already, and it also assumes that nothing hits you like after you're in the Ink Storm, and it assumes that there's only one, which there often won't be. One of their best qualities is that they're just really hard to kill. They have 900 HP, which is, you know, just like a little bit less than the total amount of a Scrapper's shield and its body. So like imagine, you know, sitting and focus firing a Scrapper until it breaks down and then killing it. That's like almost as much ink as you need to focus fire on a Drizzler. And some weapons just can't do that in one cycle. In fact, pretty much only like Splatlings can, I think, because they're not even exposed for that long. And also a lot of the spread fire weapons that are really good up close, like the Sploosh-o-matic, you'll notice if you're on equal ground with the upturned Drizzler that like half of your shots will be hitting the stupid underside of the umbrella and going like tink, 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 which is very frustrating. But yeah, like even a fully charged E-liter, it takes like 1.5 fully charged E-liter shots to kill one of these. They are very tough. It's like the highest HP of a thing you would actually reasonably focus fire, other than the Scrapper, I guess. But of course, they have this intended method of killing them, which is reflecting the Ink Storm missile, but it's very difficult. Like, it's not so much that it's difficult, it's more that there are so many things that can go wrong between that missile being shot out and you reflecting it back at it. It could hit level geometry. That happens like all the time. There are so many stages where it'll be in a position where it's firing over like a ledge or over your ink basket, and you knock it back like you're supposed to, and it just explodes on the level. A salmonid could walk between you and the thing, like literally any salmonid. The only salmon that doesn't block those shots is the steel eel, actually, because it has to like fire through steel eel grates, I guess, is why it's coded like that. So you can also knock it back through a steel eel. But most things, like just a random chum will walk in front of the Drizzler, and if you hit the missile back at that point, it won't kill the Drizzler. It's just very disappointing. It fires so far away from itself, also, that like you have to be in a very particular place in order to knock it back. You can't be like anywhere near it, basically. Once again, ranged weapons, I feel, have a bit of an easier time because they're not as restricted in where they can stand. And once again, really short weapons like the Sploosh-o-matic, sometimes they fire the missiles so high in the air that like you can't even reach them with certain really short range weapons. The missiles also have 100 HP for some reason, which is like, 4 shots with a lot of weapons. I don't know why they're so hard to reflect back. And when they first shoot them out, they have like a metal barrier on them. Like there's just so many, like I might be in the right spot to reflect it back, but then like when it fires it still has the metal barrier on it, and then something else chases me away from that spot. So like they made all these little annoying things with this process of killing these that just makes them like one of the most durable bosses. I've talked a lot about it already, I feel like. Oh, and I want to talk about one stage with these guys in particular, and that is Lost Outpost. Whoever designed... So the Drizzlers sit in pre-programmed spots, you may have noticed. They always go to the same spots. And whoever designed where they would go and aim their missiles on Lost Outpost is like Satan. They're complete masochists, because they will jump and go like somewhere outside the walls of the base, right? And they will just fire the missile straight into the wall over and over. And so if you're playing on Lost Outpost, like you're just going to get rained on. There's really no way to stop it other than having 2 teammates go outside the walls of the outpost and focus fire a Drizzler, probably, which is like, so much more coordination than you'd ever have. And the other thing about them is they move silently too. Like so many of the other bosses I've talked about have sound cues, and these guys just like sail through the air, have no sound cue until they fire their weapon. And the thing about things in the air, I could have mentioned this with the Steelheads too, I guess, is you're conditioned to kind of look at the ground a lot in Splatoon because the turf is so important in terms of like seeing where you can swim. And so something that you have to be looking up to notice is like also has a strength to it, I think. Okay, so yeah. Basically, like, you might not always... You won't see the words like splatted by the Drizzler on the screen as often as you might see from other bosses, but like they'll almost always have, if they're on the stage, they're gonna do damage to you, and like I think that's pretty valuable. It's kind of like how a baseball team might not measure productivity and like runs scored; they'll measure it with like on base percentage. The Drizzler gets the salmonids on base. It gets some damage on you, and then you can die to like anything else, right? Like you'll die to a small fry if you've been rained on enough. And obviously, again, if there's multiples of them on like Lost Outpost, which there frequently will be, once there's even 2 ink storms up, it's a big problem. All right, next up, the Stinger. I could put Stinger maybe in S tier, or like maybe in A. I'm going to put it in A for now, so there's like a nice symmetry. The official art is kind of shaped like an S for S tier. My fun fact about these is they have 7 pots that you have to shoot, and the 7 pots have 60 HP each, and 7 times 60 is 420. They have 420 HP, not making that up. So... unlike the Drizzler, so they also do damage over time. They do 1 damage per frame, which is 60 per second. So unlike the Drizzler, they will kill you very fast in like, a second and a half. if you're standing still. So you kind of just have to move once a stinger is targeting you. And the same person who was Satan, who's programmed the Drizzler landing spots, also made the stingers always target the furthest away player. So the player who is furthest away from it and like least able to deal with it is always going to be the one who's most inconvenienced by it. And I'm pretty sure that's right. I seem to remember sometimes when like I've been closing the gap with a stinger and it was shooting me, but it must have been that my teammates and I were all kind of a similar distance and it chose me as a target then, and then I closed the gap after. But it would seem that the downfall of these guys is that they die really easily. Like a blaster will just one-shot them. Most rapid fire weapons will take care of them pretty quickly. Some weapons don't do so well, like, you know, a bucket doesn't, any roller doesn't do well on it. Obviously a charger has to like tap fire multiple times on each pot, and that's just awful. So it's kind of, you know, depends on the weapon. But most weapons can deal with it well. So it would seem like it has bad defense, but honestly, just the fact that it's always so far away from you kind of contributes to its defense. Like, in terms of the total amount of time it takes to kill a stinger, you have to factor in that like travel time. Just the amount of time to go from one end of the stage to the other to kill a stinger that's shooting you. Like, so much time comes off the clock if you're ever paying attention to that. So that's bad. And then of course they're the exact opposite of an egg delivery vehicle, like as opposite as you can even be. Like a Drizzler at least will sometimes be coded to land near your egg basket, like on spawning grounds. There's like that part that's right near the egg basket. That's like a pretty convenient spot for them to land. But a stinger will never do that. It will always be like way out on the very edge of the water, and when it dies there, its eggs will be right on the edge of the water where the guys who like reclaim them, the snatchers, will get them as soon as possible. So yeah, the moral of the story is, if a stinger is like on the map and it's firing and it's not firing at you, you should go kill it. Like, especially if it's not firing at you, which is, you know, not intuitive. And it takes a lot of like experience before you realize that. Especially ones that spawn early, because like, all right, if they're spawning at the edge of the stage and there's 20 seconds left, it's probably better to just dodge for the rest of the wave rather than go and try and take care of it, because it would take too long. But if it spawns at like the start, holy cow, like don't let that thing get a ton of free shots off on you. Take care of it ASAP. Alright, and then the final boss, you know who it is. Oops. It is the flyfish. So, to kill a flyfish, you need 2 teammates who have the ink for bombs to throw like a good accuracy shot in their baskets within the allotted time. Or like one teammate can do it if they have enough turf down and is good at the game and doesn't have too many other things like bothering them. Oh, and if 2 teammates do it, they can't throw in the same basket, which happens all the time. They have to throw in the 2 different baskets. They need to be coordinated enough. I consider like being able to solo in one cycle flyfish, like if you can do that, you've graduated in Salmon Run. You're a professional in my book. It's like so important to be able to do. And I haven't talked about the specials a lot, like the player specials. Obviously, yeah, you can stingray them. It's a good idea, always. But, like, you know, if a boss is so good that it requires you to special them, like, you know, you can't count on that, always. I guess I could also talk about the Sploosh-o. That's like the one weapon they added that presumably deals with the flyfish well. But that's, you know, one weapon out of 50. And even then, it's not really that easy to kill it with Sploosh-os. Like, your splat bombs at least have like a laser sight on them, and the Sploosh-o doesn't, and it's actually quite a delicate shot. But yeah, Salmon Run, I've probably made the joke before. Splatoon 2 Salmon Run is the best basketball game I've ever played because of the fly fish. It's not 2K, it's not NBA Street, it's throwing splat bombs into the fly fish baskets. They're just 2 flying basketball hoops. They even have like backboards. You can do bank shots on them. And yeah, it just feels like just the physics of it, the momentum, how your momentum changes your shot, like the different arcs you can put on it. That it just feels more like shooting a basketball than anything else in video games. It's crazy. And it's not by accident. They put a basketball hoop like in the Splatoon 1 training area. They made Gobi Arena. There's definitely like hoop heads on the dev team. So yeah, Flyfish, honestly, like even though I'm putting them S tier, they're probably like a large part of why I've played Salmon Run so long. Just because they're so challenging and rewarding to fight. Which gets back to like what I was talking about with the Steelheads. It's like not actually important for these to be balanced against each other. I think it's kind of fun that some are clearly so good and problematic. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how the ones they add in Splatoon 3 stack up. So yeah, that's about it. I'm gonna post, when I post this video, I'll also include the tier maker link, so you can tell me what you think, where these guys should be ranked. And I'll also include the Splatoon wiki page for Salmon Run data that I've been referencing. It's pretty helpful. So yeah, video over.